Works just well enough to be dangerous. I used to work for a company that built security camera systems. The company in question designed and built the actual DVR itself, writing the software. Not sure how much of it was programmed from scratch, but our software department was at least in the same building, if nothing else. I was a lab tech with the hardware guys, assisting with any RAN testing as well as failure analysis, if something got returned from the field. In the hardware department we did actual component level repairs on the circuit boards, so we had a microscope to give us a better chance of getting surface mount components lined up correctly. We had an intermediate level of test equipment at our disposal, oscilloscopes, bench power supplies and multimeters, as well as simple components like resistors and capacitors that could be tacked across strategic parts of the circuit, or a protoboard, to see if it was an effective fix for any problems we might encounter with either a prototype or a production board. The DVR I worked on had a small NiMH backup battery, not enough to actually continue to record, but more so that if power was lost while recording, the files would finish saving so that they were not corrupted. One day, we get a returned unit where the complaint was a battery-related fault code was showing up. I open up the box and test the battery with my multimeter. Sure enough, it's as dead as a brick. With a bench power supply that has a built-in current meter, I give the DVR 12 volts to the main power input, and it boots up normally, and it is drawing the normal amount of current. So far so good. We had a little adapter that allowed us to measure the current going to and from the battery, as we were checking for any parasitic current draw that might otherwise discharge the battery, which would necessitate more frequent recharging, thereby shortening its service life, as well as testing the charging circuit. So, I choked up said adapter to make sure it wasn't a board fault that killed the battery. I then choked up a known good battery, and rather than begin charging the battery, the DVR is drawing about 0.25 A from the battery while the DVR is plugged into main power. What? I shut down the 12 volts input to the DVR, and it hard stops immediately as though it lost all power. So where is that 0.25 A going? Certainly not where it should be going. I look at the schematic and try to work out what might draw a small current like that if it failed. Searching for a hot component probably wouldn't work, because 0.25 A wouldn't create a noticeable amount of heat. However, if there's an intermittent problem, pressing on the board might yield results. On a 12-volt system with a relatively low current draw, it is pretty safe for you to touch it with your finger. Of course, you must ground yourself before doing so, lest you break something with static electricity. So I put on my anti-static wrist strap and start randomly pressing my finger against components while watching the meters and... Ouch! Well, that chip is boiling hot, so it is probably broken. Well, that wasn't too hard. Weird that the current draw is almost normal, save for the 0.25 A from the battery. So, I circle the chip on the schematic so that I remember which part to replace. I then reach over to pick up the battery and ouch. The battery is also boiling hot. Zomgutfk. Immediately I realize that any kind battery being too hot to touch is a very bad thing, and disconnect it in a hurry, then rushing to turn off everything on the bench. I scan the area surrounding the battery for any paper or other flammable materials that need to be moved away from it. There weren't any, except that the table was made of wood. So I grabbed a metal baking pan we had nearby and put it over the battery. I thought of putting the battery on the pan, or tossing it in the freezer, but I didn't think it was wise to move it for fear that handling it might set it off. I mentally reminded myself of where the fire extinguisher had been, and, suppressing my urge to sprint, instead walked over there just to make sure it was still there. Thankfully, it was right where it belonged. I decide not to pick it up, lest I panic anyone when there isn't even any smoke coming out, much less flames. Instead I went back to the bench and stood several feet away, watching and listening for any signs of an imminent fire. After a few minutes the battery had cooled down. Phew. However, 0.25 A was well within the normal operating range of the battery. Even if it wasn't, there's no way on earth anything could create that kind of heat at that voltage without drawing at least 10 times that amount of current, at least, not without actually using the battery to literally ignite pyrotechnics. Something just wasn't adding up here, which made me suspect a problem with the multimeter. Sure enough, if I use the constant current mode on the bench power supply, making a mental note not to exceed the maximum safe current for the amps jacks on the multimeter, I discovered that the auto-ranging multimeter was apparently stuck at the low end of the amps measurement mode. Strangely enough, once you exceeded 0.25 A, the meter did not say "oh, L," like it was supposed to, it would just stop rising, making you believe you were only drawing 0.25 A even if you were actually drawing much more than that. Yet, the fact that the current meter still changed when you connected something, would fool you into believing that the meter was still working properly. The way I could tell is that the bench power supply had a current meter of its own, and I could crank it up to 3 amps and the meter would just sit there, still showing 0.25 amps. The meter's maximum was 10 amps, and it was protected by a fuse. Given that not knowing you were overcurrenting a battery could be rather dangerous, I removed the fuse for the current measurement jack and put a note on top stating that the current measurement mode did not work. I later found that the battery in question had a PTC built into it. A PTC is sort of like a circuit breaker, though it resets by letting it cool rather than having to press a reset button. It trips when it gets hot, but it only reduces the current rather than cutting it off. So the battery just gets relatively hot, but not enough to be dangerous, and just dumps current into the fault until it runs out and dies. Story 2. Have you considered not giving the administrator password to everyone? If everyone involved were honest, I imagine the conversation would go like this. Hello, I am $manager from $customer company and I need assistance with a bug. Some important files have again been changed / moved / deleted / defaced. Hello, I am $op, your stupidly expensive consultant here to fix your mess, again. This is not a bug, the files were modified on $date by the administrator account. That's not possible, I'm the only person using the administrator account and I didn't do anything. Are you 100% sure? If so, you may have a security breach and I will need to alert everyone, change passwords, etc. etc. No, don't change the password, otherwise I'll need to tell everyone all over again. Everyone? You said you are the only person with the password. Well, of course my coworker has the password for when I'm out. And my team for the jobs I don't want to do myself. And the CEO because he asked, and how can you say no to the CEO? I'll pretend I didn't hear that. Don't put it into an email or I'll be forced to reset your passwords for real. You know that you shouldn't share passwords, right? But we all need to work on this and we all need the highest permissions, and anyway I trust everyone not to do anything wrong, ever. Sure, I guess those files got deleted all on their own? It must have been the new employee, they're very stupid, it won't happen again. Right. Listen, this is the 24,601st time this happened already. How about we make individual, named accounts for everyone here? I'll even give you all admin privileges, even though I know it's a bad idea, because I know you'll share passwords anyway, and at least next time someone breaks something we'll know exactly who it is and we can go frown at them and get them some basic remedial computer training. That would be smart, and save us a lot of money and headaches in the long run, so I have to refuse. We will continue with the current system of letting everyone use the administrator account, and I'll call it in a couple of weeks when I FCK up something else. I meant the intern, it was definitely the fault of an intern. Sure thing, that'll be 1K and thanks for your contribution to my quarterly bonus. Fictional conversation, real customer. Instead they just insist they have no idea what's happening and I have to roll with it. Take it from me, consultants are not paid for their expertise, we're paid not to laugh in the customer's face when they lie to us about their SHD security practices.